Hey everyone, Social Solipsist here for another episode of 52 and 52, and this week I'm taking a look at Gigantic. Now, Gigantic is a self-described free-to-play multiplayer shooter. However, I would classify it more in the MOBA genre. It is a third-person MOBA, sort of similar to things like Smite, but also incorporating, aspects of a number of other genres. But at its core, I would call it a MOBA. So this is a game that I've actually been meaning to do a video on for, well, I think it was, I had originally aimed for it to be episode 40 of this season, but obviously that didn't happen. And I've been playing it, or I was playing it for about a good 3 months prior to when this video will go up. I've actually stopped playing at this point. Playing it at this point. We will get to the reasons why at some point in the future of this video. But it's an interesting little game, and it is definitely, despite its issues, valuable and interesting, and if nothing else, something to be learned from, good and bad. So first and foremost, let's talk about its visual style. There are some. Well, let's talk about the UI first and foremost. The title menus and all that are, let's not beat around the bush, cribbed directly from Overwatch. Like, no two ways about it. They put their own skins on it and everything like that, but it is, location for location, menu for menu, identical. And I'm not going to hold that against them at all, because Overwatch has one of the best menus that I have ever seen in a multiplayer game. And I would absolutely like if everyone would steal from them, because then, we'd have less crappy UX in this world, and we could always do with less crappy UX. So there is that, and it's not very inspired, but it's good. And then there's the visual style of the game itself. When you actually get into game and you look at the characters and you look at the maps that you're playing on and all that, the style is, I was about to say, great. Because it's really interesting, it's unique, it's sort of cel-shaded, sort of cartoony, exaggerated characters, bright colors, blocky, spiky things, everything is exaggerated in just the right ways to show off a particular style that I think they're aiming for, the slightly irreverent, cartoony feel. As far as the character designs themselves go, visually, I think they are every one of them is unique and interesting, and you notice new things about each of the characters they've designed every time you look at them. And likewise with the actual gameplay for each character, there is no doubt in my, I shouldn't say there's no doubt in my mind, but there is no way you could play all the characters and say some of these characters play the same, because they don't. Each character is completely individual to one another. They are unbelievably unique, in fact. To the point where it almost hurts the game a little bit, because it almost feels like the characters come from different games. And I only say that because I do not think that the game has a really solid universe built around it. And obviously Overwatch has shown us that you don't have to have a really extensive, deep lore to build a really good world to tie a variety of disparate characters and disparate abilities together. It really doesn't take a whole lot. That said, I mean, some of the character designs are also not as blatantly cribbed from Overwatch, but there's certainly some very heavy influence on some of the characters. In particular, the I want to say I want to say he's called HK206 or something like that. The obvious Bastion character is obvious. There's no two ways about that one. And some others are clearly inspired in certain ways, but none in any way that rubbed me the wrong way. I was never bothered by any of the choices that were made on that front. So yeah, all of the various characters are unique in a variety of ways. And in addition, because of how they've decided to build things, character progression is also very interesting. There is an immense amount of depth to your character progression. You get a point every time, in similar MOBA fashion to most MOBAs. You get points as you level up in the round, and you can spend those points on various skills to improve them in various ways. But there's an actual like skill tree system. Now, I played 95% of my games just using the auto select my next skill thing. But when I did fiddle around with it, there was definitely enough there to show me that you can build the same character a variety of very different ways. You can focus a character on being extremely offensive or extremely defensive, or utility or something like that. With very specific, like the skill upgrades are very specific. It's not just you do more damage. It's there's always some more depth than that. So you're either adding, secondary effects to your abilities, or that's there's always a bit more depth there. It's not half-assed in any way. So in addition to the 4 abilities you have for your character, there's also an ultimate. Your ultimate is it's built, basically you get points towards your ultimate by doing pretty much anything. As long as you're, in combat, as long as you are capturing points or whatever else, as long as you're doing something, you are gaining more towards your ult. And there are 3 tiers. Each character has 3 tiers of their ult. So that either means you get more shots of it, or it gets more powerful, or it has a larger range, that sort of thing. And it can be used typically they are built very well to be used in both an offensive and defensive way. It is unusual to feel like any of the abilities, in fact, are only geared towards, one type of play. That said, the character balance is definitely a problem, in that there is none. There's pretty much none. There are characters, obviously there are characters that are counter picks to one another, which actually becomes a bigger issue than you might immediately think, because unlike something like Overwatch, this is more typical of a MOBA, and you can't change your characters in the round, and you don't get to see who your opponents are picking until you're already in, so you may just be getting harassed for an entire round. But if you've got a good team, they should be able there's enough people on a team that you should be able to be helped out by your companions and make it through and still be useful. You typically shouldn't have a totally awful time just because somebody counterpicked you. But it certainly does happen. As far as the gameplay itself, I also think that this is a really interesting development. In fact, I think it's the most interesting thing that this game has done altogether. Rather than your usual MOBA fare of, kill either, kill minions or kill champions to build up money to get to level up, get more abilities faster, get money, get equipment, that sort of thing, to become stronger than your opponents. The main mechanic is you get score, your team gets score for completing objectives, and there's a variety of different objectives. However, this has the very obvious side effect that I will talk about in more detail of if you do not play as a team, you are screwed. Like, completely and utterly screwed. This is the another side effect of those all the characters being so different is if you go off on your own, you're gonna get melted. It pretty much doesn't matter who you are. You will get melted because each character is very clearly for, you know, a specific kind of thing, and they've got limited cooldown, you know, very limited cooldowns and that sort of thing. You can't wander off. And if you go on tilt, if you start chasing people, it's only going to get worse. But the variety of different objectives are obviously you get objective points for killing a champ. You get objective points for capturing a point or having I forget what they call them. Basically, you have sentries that you get to sit on the points. I'm sure you've been watching them in the footage at this point, so you know what I'm talking about. But there's a variety of points around the map that are generally held, you know, three or four to a side. And as long as you have one of these AI summons that you've placed on one of your points, they will automatically collect points at a regular interval that will add towards your score. This is gonna get... I really am going to explain this whole thing. This is gonna be a long ass video. Buckle in. If you haven't already. But you're 12 minutes in, so you have. Anyway, I digress. So, as long as you are holding a point with a summon, you get points. And if you attack an enemy summon and defeat it, you deny them the ability to auto pick up the points. And there are also certain summons that you can put on your enemy's points in order to fully deny them from building points on there at all. So, you can see how this could lead to a lot of really interesting team play. The unfortunate reality is that 90% of the time it doesn't, because, well, people on the internet are garbage and don't want to play as a team. They just want to play Call of Duty with a different skin. They want to play deathmatch. They don't want to do objectives or work as a team or anything like that. And honestly, that is why Spencer and I stopped playing this game. Well, I won't speak for him, but I think that is why we both stopped playing this game, is because it just becomes kind of misery when the other team is working as a team and your team is not, and you want to scream because nobody will help you, and a 5v2 isn't going to work. It just won't. But yeah, so those various objectives that you complete and the points that you gain build up to a variety, or will build to either an attack or a defense between the two, let's just call them gods that you are assigned. You are assigned to one of two sides. You have a god character to protect, and if you make it to 100 points before the other team does, you get to attack them. Or you get your god to attack their god, or vice versa if they get 100 points before you. This also leads to some interesting things. After a certain number of fights between the two gods, they'll go to what is called a clash, which is basically just their way of saying, this game's gone on too long, so we're going to change the map so that you don't get bored. Which is a workaround for a problem that, you know, ought not to be a problem. I don't hold that against them for it. I actually think it's a clever workaround to keep things fresh in what tend not to be that long of games anyway. I mean, 20 minutes is pretty typical for most games. But anyway, I'm getting off topic again. Where was I even going with this? So, let's talk about the gameplay a bit now that we've talked about these interesting things that they've done with it. Unfortunately, despite all of the interesting designs that they've put together, and it being crippled by a typical internet player base that can't work together, there are definitely some program issues as well. So the one that I ran into that was most frustrating for me is that in various ways the netcode is a problem. So both the in-game netcode, if you have a bad connection, if you've got high ping or intermittent disconnects or stuff like that, the game handles that very poorly. And by that I mean, and you probably will see it in some of this footage at one point or another, and hopefully I'll remember to actually splice it into this time code, you will start teleporting around. And I don't mean that you'll that the game will pause and then you'll run and then you'll suddenly be further along than you thought you were, or teleport back to where you had been before. No, you'll teleport to a totally random direction. It's really weird and I don't understand it. It's not even, you ran into an obstacle and automatically skirted around it. No. You could be running in a straight line, not touch anything other than W, and when the connection catches up to you, suddenly you've made a 120-degree turn and are off in some other alley for some reason. It's really strange, and well, I wish my internet connection was better so it wasn't a problem at all, but that doesn't change the fact that the netcode should be, better than that. The other major networking issue is that matchmaking is poor, very poor. This is a combination of there not being a very large player base, but also not having systems in place to mitigate the issues. So first and foremost, it could take, at some times, especially at extremely low traffic times, it could take 15 minutes to get in queue to get into a round, which is just inexplicable. I know there were not that many players playing at the time. I was checking Steam charts and things like that, but yeah, I can't fathom how it was taking that long at some times. But the part that exacerbates that is that there is no system for ensuring people stay connected and then fixing it if they don't reconnect. So for rage quitters, there is no retribution. And for people who just, decide they can't get into a game or something like that, they don't have enough time. If they drop out of a match that's already running, you just lose a character. It doesn't become AI, you just lose it. You're 4v5 now. If they drop out during either of the lobbies, you go back to the main menu and have to queue up again. It does nothing to try and, connect someone in. And obviously that has an effect on wait times as well. Because if it dropped whoever was, next in line into the game the lobby that was being built, you wouldn't have 4 people restarting the lobby building, and you wouldn't have as many people queuing up and waiting and waiting and waiting. I'm sure that this is a limitation of the size of the team and the amount of investment, and having to cut corners in some places. But for a completely online game, it's a big problem. What else was I going to talk about? I'm losing my train of thought. Yeah. So there's that. As far as other technical issues go, there are some definite issues with frame rate. I have an older but still very beefy computer, and it would still chug. And I'm not entirely sure why, because it wasn't maxing out my CPU or GPU or RAM. It just was poorly optimized or some such thing, or maybe it was even part of the netcode. I'm sure that had some effect at some point or another. So, yeah, technically, there were quite a number of problems with it. So what else can I talk about? Let me look at my little notes here. I already talked about balance, maps. Maps, there are kind of a limited number of maps. I think it's only 3 or 4. I thought it was maybe 5. I don't hold this against them either. League only has 1 map. So, you know what? We'll let that fly. However, music, there's 1 music track. And that's not great. You could definitely use some more music. Yeah, let's talk about the meta part of it now. So then there's the issue of it being free to play. And from an economic standpoint, free to play is a rough space to be in for a game developer if it's not an immediate success. Obviously, funding sources have some effect on how much work you can put into things. Sometimes you're dropping it gambling that you're gonna get income, otherwise you're screwed. And I don't know how that's worked out for them. However, free to play with microtransactions and a very small player base is not a way to run a successful and profitable business, and thus not a way to ensure that your game gets good maintenance and expands the business and all of that. So it's got multiple kinds of microtransactions, and some are fine and some are a bit more offensive. There are obviously skins that can be purchased, or actually, let me back up for a minute. Before we talk about microtransactions, let's talk about the purchase of the game, because it's actually not free to play. It is, and you can play whoever is on rotation, whichever characters are on rotation on any given week. However, if you want to either have 10 of the characters or all of the characters going there on out, I believe it's either $15 or $30 for one of those 2 selections. Now, when Spencer and I first picked this up, Spencer had suggested this as a game we could play, or maybe I did. I don't even remember. But he almost immediately purchased the $30 you get every character from here until we stop developing the game pack, and that also came with a free to him, well, and not free, but an extra giftable pack for the lower tier membership. You get 10 characters to keep that selection, and he gave that to me, and that was good. Gave me, some characters to play with. That said, I don't know that it would have changed how much I played that much if I had just if I had only had the free rotation characters. Uh, it was rare that, you know, there aren't that many characters. There's like 20 or something like that. And it started out with like there were 4 new characters during the duration of my time playing it, I believe. So obviously the newest characters as they were released did not go free to play. Either often, or, you know, they didn't go on the free to play rotation at all for a little while, but they would soon be added in. Usually you had about a month before a character would end up in the rotation. So what I'm getting at there is that I don't know that I would have been bothered that much. I've never been bothered by only being able to play the free to play rotation. But anyway, with I'm getting too far into this, but you can either pay either 10 or 15, I don't recall which, or $30 to get started on the game. But then there's the microtransactions, which I will now come back to. There are cosmetic microtransactions to purchase skins and things like that. There are also your usual MOBA fare of buying boosts for various things, particularly progression, that is. But you also have to buy your characters, obviously. Or you can, if you want to. You have to buy characters and summons. You are given 3, or, well, actually, I assume that you're given the same 3 summons I always had as stock, but I don't actually know. I could be mistaken about that, but I assume you have to have 3 summons. So you must have had them. Anyway, there are 3 summons that you have right off the bat. And then there are a number of others that you can buy, and more were added as we played. So that gets into the area of not pay to win. Well, no, I am going to say it's pay to win. Because some of the summons are outright upgrades from the base ones. So if you purchase a summon, either through microtransaction or through in-game currency, which you can just play enough, you have just an advantage. So that is a game design sin, but it also is also a microtransaction sin. And it is a microtransaction sin because the in-game currency is accrued at an extremely low rate. After 60 hours or near enough of gameplay, I hadn't spent any, and I could only afford 2 characters or like 1.5 summons or maybe a couple of skins. Not all of the above, any one of those 3 combinations. The in-game currency is not accrued at a rate that is reasonable at all for the free-to-play spectrum. So, you know, you can take that in a variety of ways. I wouldn't be so pleased by that. And in general, account progression, what can I say? Account progression actually has some interesting stuff to it, because you obviously get your regular experience for continuing to play, experience for every round, but also for completing certain tasks in games of, doing a certain amount of damage with a certain character, or getting a certain number of kills, or they have this, badges system of, basically you get these badges in each game for completing certain tasks, killing 3 characters, healing for this much, those sorts of things. And those then add up to these sort of achievements that get you extra XP on your account. It's a whole thing. It's very extensive and very deep and generally very well put together, but limp. Let's just say that. It's limp at the end of the day. And for all of this, I want to make it clear that I don't resent the time that I spent with this. Not at all. In fact, if you are interested in this at all, I still recommend checking it out. I won't offer to play with you. I will include a link in the description that is a reference code from my account, so that you will get some bonus stuff when you start. I think you get like a 10 game XP boost or something like that. I don't recall. But that's neither here nor there. The two of us had a lot of fun with it. But we had wished that we could get more people to play it. We had wished that a lot of other things about it were improved. We had wished that it was more balanced. That there weren't just games that just felt crappy because no one was helping. There's so much more to be said. In fact, I'm thinking of more and more things I can say, but I don't want to just drone on, and especially since I've already backed away from topics that I'd then be coming back to. There's a lot here. This is a valuable game. This is a game that needed to exist at some point. Somebody needed to make some of these developments in the MOBA space, in the video game space. And if nothing else, I appreciate them for being bold in their choices. For all its problems, I am pleased with the time I spent with this game. Unfortunately, this video is going to have a bittersweet ending because, well, yeah. So this game is developed by a company called Motiga, I believe, who are a subsidiary or were purchased by or are funded by Perfect World. Now, just in the last week, Perfect World closed down Runic Games, who made Torchlight and Torchlight 2 and a number of other games. Torchlight being a game that I was extremely fond of for a very long time. They completely closed down Runic, which was based in Seattle, and they moved Motiga to be a Skeleton Crew. For all intents and purposes, Motiga, the company that built this game, are dead. It was always apparent that they were a small, struggling team. Their website has been out of date for literally years. Very clearly a team that was passionate but had certain priorities and perhaps did not have the oversight of a bigger game company that had somebody doing everything. There were probably a lot of people in that office that were wearing a lot of different hats at the same time. And it's a shame that they are now running this Skeleton Crew. The official PR is that Motiga is not dead, and that the limited staff are going to keep this game open for the foreseeable future and even continuing developing the characters that were due to be released and things like that. How long this actually lasts is another question entirely. The PR stance is upbeat, but if they were dead at Christmas, or just after Christmas, I wouldn't be all that surprised. That's a bit of a shame, because with well, let's be honest, quite a lot of work. This game could have been amazing. It was already inventive and interesting and just, you know, that's really what held me. It was enthralling. It was a great ride to be on. But that ride had some, you know, broken animatronics and like rattly tracks and some questionable stuff that you were like, really? Is that, wait, does nobody know that this is a problem? This metaphor is going to get tortured, but I mean, with a lot of work, it could have been amazing. And I'm always sad to see a game company shut down. Anybody who is inspired to make something, whether I particularly like it or not, I don't want to see them fail. And so, yeah, that's the somber note this video is going to go out on, and this game is going to go out on, is Motiga is, for all intents and purposes, a dead company. So anyway, on that somber note, thank you guys for watching yet another episode of 52 and 52. I have been the Social Solipsist, and I will see you guys next time.